Shalom, how's everyone doing? Today's day 34 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and we'll be learning Siman Seif Daled. Let's begin. Tzrichin lizaher, a person has to be very careful. Shebechol makom sheish le'estapik, in any place where a person suspects shema yisham tzoa meriglaim, maybe there's tzoa meriglaim there. Lo yimar sham shem davar shebekdusha. You're not allowed to say any davar shebekdusha ashi yivtok es makom until you check the place. Vehin le'espala b'vayis, a person should not daven in the house. In ba'aliyah yish makom etunath. If on the upper floor of the house is a makom etunath, is a disgusting place. Okay, so what's the Kitzur talking about over here? So obviously, as we've been dealing with, there's halacha, one is not allowed to say Dvarim Shebekdusha in the presence of tzoa or meir glaim. So the question is, how much does a person have to suspect that there is tzoa or meir glaim in front of him? Every time he says Dvarim Shebekdusha, he has to check if there's tzoa or meir glaim there. So let's see what the Gemara says. Alright, this is in Brachos Chaf Hei Amud Aleph. It says over there, quotes Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says, Safik tzoa asura, Safik meir glaim mutarim. If you don't know if there's tzoa in a specific spot you are, it's asur to say Dvarim Shebekdusha. However, if you don't know if there's meir glaim there, then it's going to be mutar. Why? Seemingly because when it comes to tzoa, there's a deoraisa idea that you're not allowed to say Dvarim Shebekdusha in front of tzoa. So therefore, we revert back to the din of Safik deoraisa l'chumra. You don't know if there's tzoa there, so we're going to say it's going to be a deoraisa, so we're going to go l'chumra. We're going to say you cannot say Dvarim Shebekdusha until you check the place. However, meir glaim is only a derabanan, right? Once it touches the ground, we've discussed it's only a derabanan. Therefore, we're going to revert to the din of Safik derabanan l'kula, and that's okay. But still, seemingly from this, how far do we have to go? How far do we have to suspect that there's tzoa in a place? So that's why the Gemara goes on, and it said there's an ikud amri, and we hold like this. This is the way the Rambam paskins and the Shulchan Aruch paskins. What does it say? Amar Rav Yehuda. There's a different version of Rav Yehuda. Safik tzoa b'vayis mutaras. Let's say you're in a house, and you don't know if there's tzoa there. So we say it's fine, mutar. You could say Dvarim Shebekdusha. Ba'ashba asura. However, if you're near like a trash can, a trash that there's a suspicion that there would be tzoa in that trash, then one is not allowed to say Dvarim Shebekdusha until he actually checks the trash. And this makes a lot of sense, right? So how far do we have to go to suspect there's tzoa? If there's a reasonable chance, right? If you're in a house, there's probably not going to be tzoa there. If you're actually buying ashpa, buying trash, then there's more of a chance. So that's something we have to be concerned about. And then the Gemara says, when it comes to meir glaim, though, even if you're buying ashpa, and there is probably there is a chance that there's meir glaim there, it's still a suffix, or since it's a derabanan, even if there's a chance, even if there's maybe even a big chance that there's meir glaim there, we still rely on this idea of suffix derabanan l'kula. That's why it's very interesting what the Kitzur says, because the Kitzur says, Kal makom sheish le'estapik shema yisham tzoa meir glaim. Any place that you're suspecting that there's tzoa or meir glaim there, you can't say Dvarim Shebekdusha. So I understand why he says if you suspect that there's tzoa there, you can't say Dvarim Shebekdusha. That's what the Gemara says. Why meir glaim? The Gemara is mefresh and the Shulchan Aruch paskins that meir glaim is not a concern, right? Because we should rely on safik derabanan l'kula. You shouldn't even have to check. So he's probably coming from the Chai Adam. The Chai Adam says it's true. There's a halacha of Safik derabanan l'kula. Therefore, if you're in a doubt whether there's meir glaim here, we say you could say Dvarim Shebekdusha even without checking. But there's one exception to the rule. There's something called ischazik isura. If I knew for sure there was the isur there, for example, let's say I'm in a house in a room, and I knew for sure a few minutes ago there was meir glaim in this room. I knew for sure. I don't know if somebody cleaned it up. I don't know. Therefore, even though you don't know if there is meir glaim there, we still say you can't say Dvarim Shebekdusha until you check, because that's something called ischazik isura. We knew for sure there was isur there, and we apply. The Chai Adam says we apply this idea of ischazik isura even by derabanans, right? Because who says that? The Shach also agrees with that. Not everyone agrees. The Pri Chadash says we don't apply it by derabanans, but that's where the Kitzur is probably coming from. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the Kitzur has a very interesting halacha. He says that you're not allowed to daven in a house if on the upper level of the house there's a makom betuna. For example, if there's tzoa on the second story of the house and you're in the first story, you're not allowed to say, you're not allowed to daven. So seemingly this goes against everything we've been learning, right? We just said that when it comes to saying Dvarim Shebekdusha, you can't say Dvarim Shebekdusha in the presence of tzoa, which means in the same room. But if the tzoa is in a different place, you should be able to say Dvarim Shebekdusha. So where's the Kitzur coming from? So we have to read the Kitzur carefully. The Kitzur doesn't say you can't say Devarim Shebekdusha if there's Soa on the second story of a house. He says Ein Lehispalel. You shouldn't daven. Why am I so medactic about this? Because you have to look in the Shulchan Aruch. This is the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Kuf Nun Aleph. This is what the Mechaber says. The Mechaber writes that you have to be careful not to use the roof of a Beis Knesses for anything disgraceful. He says even sleeping is a disgraceful thing, because it's a disgrace to the Beis Knesses if you use the roof as something for a disgraceful purpose. Right? The Ramah has a heter. The Ramah's heter is that's only if you're building the shul l'chadchila, but let's say you decide to turn something into a shul, then it's not a problem. Fine, not getting into that. But what does the Taz say? The Taz says, even with this heter of the Ramah, that this halacha about using the roof of a shul only applies when you're l'chadchila building it, not once it's already built. There's one exception. Tashmish shel bizayon ma'od. If the thing you're doing on the roof of the shul is something that's so disgraceful, can go in avodah zarah, right? Like doing avodah zarah on the roof of a shul. O tinuf, or if there's soa, let's say there's soa on top of the shul, that is going to be problematic. Why? Because there's another halacha. There's a halacha. This is in regards to combining people to a minyan. Let's say you have 10 people. You have 6 people in the front, 4 people in the back. They're all in the same room. So you're going to tell me, that's great. They can make a minyan. Let's say there's soa in between them. Let's say you have 6 people in the front, 4 people in the back, soa in between them. So the halacha is, soa cannot connect these 10 people. They don't have a minyan. So he says the same thing if there's soa on top of people davening. Right? These people are davening. They want the tefillos to go up to Shemaim. But there's soa on top of them. So obviously Taz says that would not work. That would not work. Because he says, Davar ma'os yafsek es tefillah. Just like when it comes to making a minyan, soa makes people not be connected to a minyan. So too, when we're davening and we want our tefillos to go up to Shemaim, soa disconnects us from us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, the Taz writes that in no situation if when we daven, there's soa on top of the place we're davening, there's no situation where that would be okay. Right? Obviously, we could probably say brachos. It's probably just a Shemona Esrei thing. We probably say brachos. We could probably learn, but when it comes to davening, we have to be super careful. So the Pri Megadim points out that the Taz is saying this is not a Beis Knesses halacha, right? The Taz isn't saying that when you're building a shul, you should make sure not to put the bathroom on top of the place where people are davening because it's disgraceful. No, he's saying that soa makes a tefillos not go up to Shemaim. Therefore, the Pri Megadim says this applies to every person, even in their house. Right? Let's say somebody lives in a 2-story house. The bathroom's in the top floor. So you have to make sure that when you're davening, you shouldn't be under the bathroom, right? Because the bathroom, where the soa is, that disconnects us from our tefillos going up to Shemaim. If you look in the Mishabura, seems to say we don't accept this Taz l'halacha. And he says, the Taz seemingly has this clear proof from the idea that soa disconnects a minyan, so too it should disconnect our tefillos to Shemaim. He says it's not a good proof. He doesn't explain why. So why is it not a good proof? The Shevet HaLevi explains. The Shevet HaLevi says it doesn't make sense that just because there's soa on top of us, Hashem won't hear our tefillos. That's not something we could. That's not something that makes sense. Hashem always hears our tefillos. What's this idea that soa disconnects a minyan? He said it's like what we learn in the halachos of Tzoa, that there's a halacha called Hayamachanecha Kadosh. The place you're saying Dvarim Shebekdusha in has to be clean. Why does it have to be clean? Like the pasuk says, Ki Hashem Elokecha Hazalech B'Kerev Machanecha, because Hashem's there, right? So if you want Hashem to be there, if you want the Shekhinah to be Shara there, you want the Shekhinah to be present there can't be Tzoa disconnecting that, right? So, for example, a minyan is a place of the Shekhinah. Therefore, if there's Tzoa there that's disconnecting minyan, you can't say the Shekhinah is there. But to say that Hashem doesn't hear our tefillos if there's soa on top of us, that doesn't seem to be something that we can understand. But he says, right, if you do look in the Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch does this halacha that when you're building a shul, the second story of the shul shouldn't be used for bizayon purpose. He says this is not really a davening halacha, this is a shul halacha. Because he says if you look in the Gemara in Nida Daf Yud Gimel, It says in Nida Daf Yud Gimel that there's a guy who was standing on top of the shul, and he said he was like scared of the Shechina even on top of the shul. So the Shevet Levi, he basically asks why, like he wasn't in the shul, he was on top of the shul, he was on the roof. He was on the roof of the shul. Why was he scared of the Shechina? So Shevet Levi says it could be one of two things. I don't know if there's an afkamina, but it could be one of two things. One could be because the roof of the shul is also the fourth wall, technically, or the top wall. So it's like literally part of the shul, right? So you're standing on the roof. It's like literally one of the walls of the shul, walls of the Beis Knesset. So it's gonna have Shechina there. Or no, the roof itself doesn't have any Shechina due to the being part of the shul, but there's Shechina in the shul and it trickles over to the roof. But he says, what's it clear? It's clear that it's not a davening halacha; it's a basic Knesset halacha. So therefore, this is just a basic Knesset halacha. Therefore, one would only have to be concerned when he's building a shul that the bathroom shouldn't be on top of the place where people are davening. But when it comes to somebody who's personally davening, not in the shul, there's no problem to be careful about making sure the part on top of you doesn't have tzavah, because our tefillos could in fact go to Shemayim.